The torches in the great hall flickered as a cold wind passed through the tall stone pillars. King Aldric sat on his throne, his body thin and weak. His royal robes hung loosely on him, as if they belonged to a stronger man. His tired eyes moved over the gathered nobles who whispered among themselves. Once they had respected him. Now their whispers carried doubt and betrayal. His Majesty will now listen to the concerns of the court. Your Grace, the eastern lands are in trouble. Northern raiders have burned 2 villages, yet the crown has done nothing. Many nobles nod in agreement. Aldric gripped the arms of his throne. He knew what they thought, that he was no longer the strong king who once led armies. His illness had weakened him, but he refused to let it take his will. I know about the attacks. What do you suggest, Lord Edric? Send an army. Show them the king is still powerful. We do not have enough soldiers for a war. I will not send men to die in a battle we cannot win. Your Grace, our enemies will not wait. If we do nothing, they will see us as weak and attack again. The room grew silent. Aldric knew what they wanted. He had heard the whispers when they thought he was asleep. They wanted a strong ruler, a warrior, and they feared he was no longer one. He sat up straight, forcing his body not to betray him. I will send messengers to negotiate. Strength is not only in war, but also in wisdom. As you wish, Your Grace. The nobles slowly left, still whispering among themselves. Aldric closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the moment. He had not lost his throne yet, but he could feel it slipping. Something would break soon. He just didn't know when. In the heart of the kingdom, shadows of betrayal begin to stir. The weight of the crown grows heavier as whispers of dissent echo through the ancient halls.
Night had fallen over the castle, the moon casting silver light across the stone corridors. King Aldric sat in his chamber, a single candle burning beside him as he pored over a map of his kingdom. The weight of his crown pressed heavier than ever, though it rested on the table before him. He traced a finger over the eastern borders, where villages lay in ruins, and sighed. Enter.
Your Grace, I bring troubling news.
Continue.
There are whispers among the lords. Some say you are unfit to rule. They speak of replacing you.
Who leads this talk?
Lord Edric has been meeting with nobles in secret. Lady Evelyne, too. They gather support.
They would turn against me so easily?
Fear is a powerful force, my king. They see weakness and believe they must act.
Then I must remind them that I am still their king. I will not sit idle while they conspire against me.
What will you do, Your Grace?
I will confront them. If they seek my throne, let them dare say it to my face.
Then may the gods be with you, my king.
As Osric left, Aldric turned back to the map. The battle for his kingdom was no longer just against raiders, it was against his own people, and he would not lose. The great hall was filled with the low hum of anxious voices. Lords and ladies stood in clusters, whispering behind raised hands. The air was thick with tension. The great hall was filled with the low hum of anxious voices. Lords and ladies stood in clusters, whispering behind raised hands. The air was thick with tension. King Aldric strode into the hall, his royal cloak trailing behind him. His steps were slow but steady, his face calm despite the storm brewing around him. He mounted the dais and turned to face his court.
Summon Lord Edric and Lady Evelyne.
You called for us, Your Grace.
I've heard troubling news, Lord Edric, that you and Lady Evelyne have met with other nobles in secret.
A king should not be troubled by his subjects speaking among themselves.
When those meetings discuss removing me from my throne, I have every reason to be troubled.
Your Grace, the lords are afraid. They see the kingdom under attack, and they see a king who does not act. They wonder if the throne needs a stronger ruler.
And you believe you should be that ruler, Lord Edric? I've led this kingdom through war and peace. I have defended our lands with my own sword. I will not be cast aside by whispers in the dark.
Then prove your strength, your grace. Take up your sword again. Lead us into battle.
I will give my answer soon, but know this. Any who seek to claim my throne will find I am not so easily replaced.
He turned and strode from the hall, leaving the lords and ladies to murmur behind him. The battle for his kingdom had begun. His people carried on, unaware of the storm gathering within the castle walls.
Your Grace, the nobles await your decision.
And what do they expect me to say?
They expect either war or surrender. Lord Edric and Lady Evelyne believe the only way forward is to fight. If you do not act, they will move without you.
Prepare the great hall. Summon every noble, every commander. I will give them my answer. I have heard your fears. You believe I have grown weak. You whisper of replacing me. But let me remind you, I am still your king. We cannot afford reckless war, but we also cannot afford to do nothing, so I will lead an army myself. I will not sit idle while my people suffer, nor will I let my rule be challenged by those who plot behind closed doors. Any who question my strength may stand against me now. Then it is decided, we march at dawn.
The sound of boots on stone echoed through the castle courtyard as soldiers gathered, their armor gleaming in the morning light. The banners of the kingdom fluttered in the crisp wind, displaying the royal crest with pride. King Aldric stood at the forefront, clad in his battle armor for the first time in years. The weight of it was both familiar and foreign, a reminder of the man he once was.
Your Grace, the men are ready. The scouts report that the raiders have fortified a position near the border.
We ride at your command, Your Grace.
Then let us reclaim what is ours.
The army moved in a long column across the countryside, banners waving, weapons gleaming in the sun. The march was slow but steady, the tension growing with each mile. As they neared the border, the smell of burning wood and death filled the air. Scouts rode back with news. "Scout, the raiders have set fire to another village, Your Grace. Survivors flee into the hills."
We press on. We will not let them take another inch of our land.
As night fell, the army made camp. Fires flickered across the field as soldiers prepared for battle. Aldric stood at the edge of the camp, looking toward the distant glow of enemy fires. He knew the battle ahead would not only be against the raiders, but against the doubts within his own ranks.
You wear the armor well, Your Grace.
Do you still doubt me?
Doubt is a luxury we cannot afford. Tomorrow we fight. Prove them wrong.
Tomorrow the kingdom would see if their king was still worthy of the throne.
The sky bled red. A gruesome dawn painted the battlefield in hues of death and despair. The air, thick with the stench of sweat, fear and anticipation, hung heavy over the valley. Thousands of men waited, breaths catching in the cold air, weapons gripped tight. This was no ordinary battle. This was for survival, for vengeance. This was King Aldric's last stand. The silence of the impending battle was more terrifying than any war cry. Every soldier, from the lowliest foot soldier to the most seasoned knight, felt the weight of the coming fight. Their enemy, the ruthless Emperor Kyle, had brought his legions to the very heart of Aldric's kingdom. Defeat meant annihilation.
King Aldric, a towering figure of strength and defiance, stood on a small hillock overlooking his men. Scars crisscrossed his face, each a mark of battles fought and won. His armor, dented but not broken, reflected the crimson light of the rising sun. He was their king, their shield, their hope. He was the last lion roaring in the face of a pack of wolves. Beside him stood his most trusted companions. Sir Gareth, his loyal knight. a man who could cleave a man in two with a single swing of his greatsword. Lady Elara, the king's ward, a fierce warrior who fought with the grace of a dancer and the heart of a lioness. And old Maeglin, the king's advisor, his wisdom as sharp as any blade. They may have the numbers, Gareth, but we have the will. We fight for our homes, for our families. They fight for a tyrant's ambition. Elara, you'll lead the archers. Target their flanks. Make every arrow count. Maeglin, you're with me. We strike at their heart.
They are well fortified, sire.
Elara nodded, her eyes burning with a warrior's fire.
For the kingdom!
A horn blared, a mournful cry that shattered the stillness of the dawn. The enemy charged. The earth trembled under the weight of their advance. Aldric drew his sword, its blade singing as it left its scabbard. The king's army met the enemy's charge with the fury of a cornered beast. Steel clashed against steel, the air filled with the clang of swords, the screams of the dying, the clash of shields. Arrows rained from the sky, finding their marks with deadly accuracy. The valley became a maelstrom of violence, a gruesome dance of death.
Blood and bone. Aldric fought like a man possessed. He moved through the enemy ranks like a whirlwind, his sword a blur of death. But even a king can bleed.
A searing pain ripped through his left arm as a barbarian's axe found its mark.
He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain that pulsed in his arm. He had fought through worse. He would not fall here. Not today.
He parried a blow, spun and cut down the barbarian with a savage cry.
Find the Emperor!
Aldric roared, his voice hoarse with exertion. He hacked his way towards the heart of the enemy army, where he knew Cale would be, directing his forces like a spider in its web. Gareth, a grim shadow at his side, cut down any who dared to approach. Elara's arrows found their marks with chilling precision, each one claiming another life. Maeglin, his old eyes bright with battle lust, moved with surprising agility, his staff cracking skulls and breaking bones. They finally broke through the enemy ranks, reaching a small knoll where a pavilion draped in black and silver stood. Before it stood Cale, clad in black armor, a cruel smile playing on his lips.
Aldric, I was wondering when you'd show your face.
He raised his hand, and the fighting around them ceased. All eyes were on the two leaders, their destinies intertwined. The two kings circled each other, predators sizing up their prey. Then, with a roar that shook the very foundations of the valley, they charged. Their blades met in a shower of sparks, the clash echoing across the silent battlefield. The clash of their swords was like the clash of titans. Each blow was delivered with bone-jarring force, each parry executed with lightning speed. Aldric, fueled by righteous fury and the will to protect his kingdom, fought like a man possessed. The duel was a blur of steel and fury. Aldric, despite his wound, fought with the strength of 10 men. But Cale was a formidable opponent, his every move calculated, his every strike aimed to kill. Then it happened. A moment of vulnerability, a fleeting opportunity. Aldric seized it, driving his sword deep into Cale's chest. The Emperor's eyes widened in disbelief, his cruel laughter choked off with a gasp. He crumpled to the ground, his reign of terror finally over. A cheer erupted from the king's army, a sound of triumph and relief, but the victory cry died in their throats as their king swayed, his face pale, his armor stained crimson. Aldric had won, but at what cost?
The air crackled with tension. Two armies faced each other across a barren plain. Dust devils danced in the oppressive heat, a grim prelude to the coming storm. At the center stood two figures silhouetted against the unforgiving sun. King Aldric, young but resolute, gripped his ancestral sword, his heart hammered against his ribs. Across from him stood Vorik the usurper, a hulking figure radiating cruelty and ambition. Aldric adjusted his grip on his sword. The metal felt cold against his sweaty palm. He knew the fate of his kingdom rested on the edge of his blade. Fear gnawed at his gut, but he shoved it down. He was a king. He would not falter. Not today. Vorik grinned, a cruel, predatory expression that sent a shiver down Aldric's spine. He raised his own weapon, a wickedly curved scimitar that gleamed in the sunlight. "Ready yourself, boy!" Vorik boomed, his voice echoing across the silent battlefield. This game ends now. Aldric met his gaze, his youthful face hardened with determination. "For my kingdom," he breathed, the words lost in the vastness of the plains. "For my people." Steel met steel with a deafening clang. Aldric parried Vorik's first blow, the force of it jarring his arm. He countered with a swift strike of his own, aiming for Vorik's exposed flank. Vorik, however, was ready. He deflected the blow and pressed his attack, a whirlwind of steel and fury. Aldric gave ground, his breath catching in his throat. He was skilled, but Vorik was stronger, more experienced. Each parry sent shockwaves of pain up his arms. His muscles screamed for respite. But there was no time for rest, not while his kingdom hung in the balance. Vorik roared, his eyes blazing with bloodlust. He pressed his advantage, forcing Aldric into a defensive position. Aldric stumbled, his foot catching on a loose rock. He fell back, desperation clawing at his throat. Vorik raised his scimitar for the killing blow. A triumphant sneer twisted his lips. "It's over, boy," he snarled, his breath hot on Aldric's face. Time seemed to slow. Aldric saw the killing blow coming, felt the wind whistling past the scimitar's edge. He closed his eyes, accepting his fate. But death did not come. A surge of adrenaline, born of sheer desperation, coursed through him. He rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding Vorik's blade. The scimitar cleaved the air where his head had been a moment before. Aldric scrambled back to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He was alive. He had another chance. He met Vorik's surprised gaze, his own eyes burning with a newfound fire. He would not fall, not today. He would fight for his kingdom, for his people, for his very survival. He raised his sword, the setting sun reflecting off its polished surface. "You are not finished yet," he said, his voice hoarse but firm. The duel raged on. Aldric fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, his earlier fear replaced by a cold, burning rage. He parried, he thrust, he countered, each move fueled by a desperate will to live. Vorik, surprised by Aldric's sudden resurgence, found himself on the defensive. The tide of the battle had turned. Aldric pressed his advantage, his sword a blur of silver in the fading light. He fought with a skill he didn't know he possessed, his movements guided by instinct and fury. Then in one swift, decisive move he disarmed Vorik. The scimitar clattered uselessly on the ground. Vorik stared at Aldric, his eyes wide with disbelief. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Aldric stood over him, his sword pointed at Vorik's heart. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body shaking with exertion. But he had won. He had defeated the usurper. He looked down at Vorik, his face impassive. "It's over," he said, his voice echoing the words Vorik had spoken moments before. He plunged his sword into Vorik's heart. Vorik's eyes widened in surprise, then glazed over. He slumped to the ground, lifeless. Silence descended upon the battlefield. The only sound was the soft whisper of the wind and the groans of the wounded. Aldric stood there for a long moment, the weight of what he had done settling upon him like a physical burden. He had never killed a man before, he had never wanted to, but war was a cruel beast and it demanded a heavy price. He looked around at the carnage that surrounded him. The ground was littered with bodies, both friend and foe. The stench of blood and death hung heavy in the air. A wave of nausea washed over him, but he fought it back. He was a king now. He couldn't afford to be weak. He sheathed his sword, the metal slick with blood. He needed to see to his men, to tend to the wounded, to bury the dead. The victory was his, but it was a hollow one, purchased at a terrible cost. He was a king, yes, but he was also a young man, thrust into a role he never sought, forced to make choices no man should have to make. He took a deep breath, the air thick with the coppery tang of blood. He had won the battle, but the war was far from over. He had a kingdom to rebuild, a people to unite, and he would do it. He had to. There was no other choice. The journey back to the capital was a somber affair. Aldric rode at the head of his army, his face etched with weariness. Victory parades and celebrations seemed a world away. The echoes of battle still rang in his ears. He saw the faces of the fallen, their eyes staring vacantly into the sky. He had seen too much death, too much suffering. He had felt the cold embrace of death himself. It had changed him, marked him in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. He was no longer the idealistic young prince who had ridden out to meet Voric's challenge. He was King Aldric now, tempered by fire, forged in the crucible of war. The capital city, once a place of joy and laughter, now seemed shrouded in a pall of grief. The streets were crowded with refugees, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. The war had touched everyone, leaving its mark on the very soul of the city. He dismounted in the courtyard of his castle, his joints stiff and sore. He could feel the weight of every eye upon him, their gazes heavy with expectation. He was their king now, their savior, their hope. The throne room seemed strangely empty, despite the presence of his advisors and counselors. They bowed as he entered, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The war was over, yes, but the task of rebuilding a shattered kingdom loomed large. Your Majesty, Lord Edric, his chief advisor and a man who had served his father before him, greeted him, his voice heavy with emotion. You have saved us. The kingdom owes you a debt it can never repay. Aldric raised a hand, silencing him. There is much to be done, he said, his voice weary but firm. The war has left its mark on our land. Our people are scattered, our coffers are empty. We must begin the work of healing, of rebuilding. The advisors murmured their agreement, their faces etched with concern. They were good men, Aldric knew, loyal and capable, but even they seemed daunted by the sheer scale of the task before them. We will need to levy taxes, Lord Reginald, the Master of Coin said, his voice tight. The royal treasury is depleted. We can ill afford to raise an army, let alone rebuild what has been destroyed. Aldric listened patiently as his advisors debated the challenges that lay ahead. Their concerns were valid, he knew. The kingdom was in ruins. The treasury was empty. The people were weary of war, and rightfully so. Yet he couldn't help but feel a flicker of the same determination that had sustained him on the battlefield. He had faced Voric and his armies. He had stared death in the face, and he had emerged victorious. He would not be daunted by the challenges of peace. He rose from his throne, his gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the eyes of each of his advisors. My lords, he said, his voice echoing in the hushed hall, we have faced a terrible foe, and we have emerged victorious. But the war is not over, it has merely changed its form. We will rebuild what has been broken, he continued, his voice growing stronger, filled with a conviction that resonated through the room. We will tend to our wounded, we will honor our dead, and we will emerge from this darkness stronger than before. I swear this to you, on my crown, on my honor, on the very future of our kingdom. The task ahead was daunting, Aldric knew, but as he looked out over the city from his balcony, bathed in the golden light of dawn, he felt a surge of hope. The city, though scarred, was slowly coming back to life. Merchants were opening their shops, farmers were bringing their goods to market, and children were playing in the streets. The war was over, a new day was dawning, and he, Aldric, King of Ilara, would lead his people into this new era. He would be a just ruler, a wise leader, and a protector of his people. He would honor the sacrifices that had been made, the lives that had been lost. He would rebuild his kingdom, stronger and more prosperous than ever before. This was his promise, and he would not rest until it was fulfilled.